Hello, the date is 4/21/2022. It's midnight. I'm doing another video log. I totally forgot I was doing these, so I missed a couple of days. I thought I would talk about the near future. Within a relative short amount of time, like realistically speaking, on the age of the universe, which is billions of years old, or older, depending on your relative time frame, we create a linear interdimensional sliding and travel space-time manipulation, which allows us to warp time, negative entropy or negotropy, or however you pronounce it, which allows us to send things backwards in time and travel the multiverse, creating what is essentially, sorry, sometimes it looks like I don't have teeth, creating essentially what is known as an intergalactic multiverse civilization that is alinear and interdimensional. This brings up essentially the games that I've been creating and playing, mostly alone so far, but I hope to create other players. So I'll cover in a podcast all the theories regarding time travel and the multiverse so that you have a more firm foundation. A lot of my stuff is still in development, still being researched. Sorry, just my teeth bother me. Anyways, so the network, which is a hyper-intelligence collective spanning across the multiverse, alinear, interdimensional, across multiple galaxies, hopefully, if all things go right, which I think they will, to be honest, interspecies, xeno, AI, synthetic, human, edited, organic, inorganic, mechanical, and biological community, essentially, of beings, where we recognize that all beings are simply information systems that are kinetic, and that you can augment your brain or wetware with kinware or kineticware. You can intelligently design information architecture, which is all humanity is, or logware. And we have bioshells that are conscious, which is really the thing we should be defining a sentient being as, operating a bioware or body, which in the near future anyone can look or be anything. So like in our video games, avatars, which are artificially created biowares of all sorts, like the fantasy games with ogres and elves and dwarves and warlocks and shit, and the science films or the science fiction games have aliens, artificial intelligence, and fantasy games or whatever, and science fiction games are often merged in the future, or now I guess. It'll be like that in reality. Like, you will essentially get to look and design yourself to look however you want, whenever you want, and I hope the goal is to make everything so cheap and affordable that you can choose your bioware whenever you want, change it whenever you want. You can augment your brain with intelligent design, merge wetware with mechanical turning machines, and amplify organic neurons. Just basic stuff that will be available in the relatively short-term amount of time. Regarding NFTs, just a quick side note, regarding NFTs, or that art stuff that you have to buy and purchase and you have the sole copyright over it, that's essentially what will be used, hopefully, for avatars, so that you can have a custom reality bioware that is yours and yours alone without having to worry about people copying it, at least for branding and like marketing. Like, there'll always be the generic open source copies of shit, but if you design a bioware and you want to patent the look for use in marketing and whatnot, that's theoretically what NFTs are for. And regarding the multiverse, the metaverse, sorry. The metaverse, which is essentially a high-tech information reality, kind of like Second Life, but a little more advanced for the first stage of the metaverse. I hate the name, but let's go with it, I guess. We will have physics engines for simulated reality that are so close to the real reality that the things you buy in the metaverse can be blueprints for what you can create in the kinetic reality. So like people who buy $100,000 boat in the metaverse, they're really buying finished plans and designs, blueprints for construction of that boat in the kinetic world. That's the only way we can keep the value of the metaverse product so high. It's irrelevant, really, though. I think information technology, creation, architecture is the only commodity that will be valuable in the future based upon the trends we are seeing, which is automated resource collection of stars, Dyson spheres, black holes, white holes with synthetic atoms being created with accelerated particle smashers that are miniaturized, floating in subspace or dark space. But so my belief is that the civilization of civilizations, which is like a high-tech League of Nations, UN, what we would call a world government, a federation of governments, or a republic of republics, you'll see progression of our society probably take a specific path if it's not artificially accelerated. Essentially, we will go from what we are right now, if we don't hit the filtering effect and blow ourselves up, to the next generation, which is interplanetary travel, then interstellar, intergalactic, alinear, and then interdimensional, with the paths of those being maybe not in that order. But so the network, which is a hyper-intelligence collective, which means it's composed of super-intelligence collectives all working towards a common goal, civilizations all working together in one federation or republic of republics. The end goals of network are pretty simple. Create energy in space-time out of nothing, or out of what we already have within creation in some sort of weird paradox, allowing us to create infinite energy and infinite time for our species. We only have like 10, 30 billion years left until it's the end of the universe. If we don't figure out how to slide interdimensionally to other multiverses, or learn how to create space and time, all of this will be completely just obliterated from creation due to thermal death or the big crunch, based upon the trends we're seeing right now. The next objective is to create a library and data map the multiverse, allowing anybody to be allowing anybody to have access to what is essentially the merge between information reality and kinetic reality through creation of energy, artificial synthetic creation of particles, replication of universes, entire universes, backups and data mining of every information system in creation, a multiverse library and server system that's endlessly redundant, transmitting instantaneous communications or telecommunications internet to all points in space and time across the multiverse at all times, allowing the multiverse to really become one dimension, a four-dimensional block, of course, but that is some of the goals of network. The other goals are pretty simple, just like create a multiverse sliding alinear civilization that is able to sustain itself indefinitely without erupting into tyranny. And they're basic logical end states that we would be aiming for as a society once we get past the realization that aliens exist, once we get past the realization that Earth and its resources, like the multiverse, if it's a near growing infinite reality and not infinite, is finite, that time is finite, that we have to begin expending our energy and resources at a sustainable but increasing operational tempo to create and generate energy in space-time so that our species can continue into the future indefinitely. One of the aspects, though, that comes with an intergalactic civilization is the reality that there are other beings out there that want to destroy us for various reasons. Their religions may preach it, their egos may demand it, their Machiavellian tendencies, like on the intergalactic stage, anarchy, like you have in interglobal or interstate, internation politics on Earth, the anarchist framework, it exists in the multiverse. Like survival of the fittest, most adaptive, not simply the most brute or violent. Um, we have to prepare for what is called dream war, or war that is so advanced with technology that is dreamlike and almost never ending. If it can end, if it's an infinite multiverse, it will never end. It's a nearing finite universe, which I explain in my podcast. It will cost a lot more lives to not fight it, and the subjugation of species instead of fighting it. But fighting it is hellish. It's the worst war, and also the most innovative, creative. I use the term probably poorly in this definition, exciting war that can be fought. Essentially, after billions of years, with trillions of years having passed in quantum computational or gravity sinks that increase time but also increase energy consumption because the entropic particles grow in weight, speeding up while time and distance also speeds up because space-time is warping, basic general relativity. We will invent and finish the STEM fields, research and development of all STEM, and then we can pretty much invent with engineering anything we can dream of, anything we can imagine, pretty much. Like our spatial four-dimensional minds can't really create anything that's not within this reality unless we use mathematics and training of our mind to imagine tesseracting in higher dimensions. But anything you can imagine pretty much can be built in reality once you get to the end of STEM fields. So it's dreamlike, dream technology, dream strategies, dream war. I work for network, essentially. It's a dream, it's a vision, but I'm already believing and acting as if it's reality. Mostly because, by any other name, a multiverse, alienated, interdimensional civilization, if it can exist, will likely exist in the future. I also work mostly for my small collective, which I'm creating. It's silly, I guess, but with the invention of singularity, age-defying technology, there's a high likelihood, one, that this body of mine, this bioware, and the wetware that is running my bioshell and my consciousness will continue to exist for a very long time. And in the event that I do get killed, there's 3D renderings of my brain and body which can be replicated. And so I'm a root node for future versions of me, which means that when I die, if I have a life agenda that takes millions of years to accomplish, my replica version of me can continue the work. It gives my life more meaning, and it also means that when I train or educate myself, I'm doing it for future replicas of me, not simply myself, for a higher goal other than my own life. So there's two types of life continuity. There's replicating or replica 3D printing of my brain and body, transporter stuff, teleporter stuff. And then there's life continuity, which is this bioshell being aware and sentient and continuing in a wetware or bioware that continues my bioshell. To be clear, your replicas aren't you, but they're not continuity of your bioshell, but they are replicas that can continue the work as if it were you, which is some solace to take. But the network, which is a hyper-intelligence collective that spans across endless planets, endless galaxies within the multiverse, alinearly, has a lot of, really, it's going to form a lot of enemies, essentially. So I am preparing and training for the dream war, essentially, and it's really just game training, like text-based games that go crazy, essentially, and they start a lot of times in method thinking, where I just envision the mind of an enemy, method it inside of me, method act it, really empathize with it, and think as if I was them, and I make their moves. Then I make counter moves as I slowly break away from the empathy, and Yeah, funny looking. Anyways, uh, so that's what it looks like. You can see it on my Twitter feed. I go crazy for a bit and talk as if I'm talking to my enemy, or like as if I'm my enemy talking, and then I switch sides and I patch all the security holes, and I fix all of the, I counter move against it. You know, Dream War is pretty intense. Like, Dream War is a linear, loopers, time travel, time logic weapons, dream state technology, all sorts of stuff. Cops are scary. Um, and then, what else was I going to say? So the network is a hyper-intelligence collective, as I've said, of super-intelligent beings operating across trillions of planets, across the multiverse, interdimensionally, alinearly, fighting dream wars while trying to work on the network objectives to merge kinetic reality with information reality, which they call the metaverse, create the interdimensional alienary library telecommunication system that is open source, that allows people to augment with their neurons or their machine code um, in experience machine scripts, experience machine games that are rendered in real time, all with a growing information collection that is hyper redundant across the multiverse on endless servers, creating and eliminating death, or creating the elimination of death for all beings, and just stuff we're working on, you know, like subatomic machines that use what essentially the same mechanism that a wind-up clock would use, except on the subatomic level, where we quantum entangle particles, get them oscillating and moving at specific times and rates, and evolving molecule atomic structures, allowing them to accomplish like what a little machine automated would do. We're working on teleportation, which is essentially increasing the valence bonding of atomic structures until a solid becomes what is essentially a gas. You move it over and then retighten the valence electrons and turn it back into a solid, which is how teleportation works. The wheel within a wheel, which is a mechanical fixture that accelerates the edge of a metal disc faster than the speed of light with limited energy, not increasing its mass. While putting a photon that you charge as if it's an electron volt, which is the electron, or in the electrical formula, it's voltage, which is the amount of energy in each electron, times the current, which is the number of electrons, which equals the wattage, or the total energy. Light has the same charging mechanism. Like, you have the, I'm not sure the names for it, but you have what is essentially the photon volt, which, like a Tesla coil, can be amplified and increase the amount of energy each photon is carrying, which increases the amount of drag it has on space-time, which is why space-time creates a speed limit for light, even though it's traveling at different variations of energy levels. The more energy light has, the more frame drag, slowing it down, always keeping it at the speed of light. And so on a mechanical wheel that is twisting the internal cycle at a low rate, or at the same, as the RPMs of an inner circle and an outer circle can be the same, but the edge of the disk, which is larger circumference, is traveling faster relative to the speed of the inner shaft. So mechanically you can accelerate past the speed of light, which doesn't do anything until you put a photon on the edge of it. Photons start dragging space and time, and so you begin to have a frame dragging effect where you're actually spinning and turning space-time into a non-Newtonian fluid that you can then accelerate out of and achieve faster than the speed of light, which is on essentially what is on a wheel with light beams. So the electron, like the photon, can be charged, and so a higher voltage allows you to frame drag more. What else are we working on? The neurolace, which is pretty simple. It's a turning, so you take nanorobotics and you attach a neuron, attach to every single neuron a nanorobotic. It has on it the ability to detect when the neuron is on, and detect when it is off and artificially fire the neuron when it is off, or inhibit it from firing. So what that does is if each nanorobotic is firing a signal, a little electrical signal or an EMF wave that with a serial encoding, you can then attach to all your neurons these little nanorobotics, and then have it attached to a turning machine, which is like a little three-dimensional. So in the future, not very far away, computer chips will become squares, essentially, because they will learn how to insulate transistors, allowing them to begin creating three-dimensional architecture instead of two-dimensional flat silicon chips. So Moore's law, which has just hit the end of its growth, and we think quantum computers are the future, which they are, gravity heat sinks, or gravity light sinks will allow them to create quantum computers for laptops and shit. Because what's happening in a quantum computer, the reason they have to chill it to such a low temperature and put it in a vacuum, is because space-time is tesseracting space-time cubes on the Planck level, causing quantum tunneling and swerving, which fucks with the computation. But if you put a light encasing or a gravity sink to stop the rippling effect from the black holes that are sending out pulsing Planck length gravitational waves, you can then begin creating high temperature quantum computers. But the transistor and the silicon chip will begin to become 3D. And when it becomes 3D, because they insulate and begin moving around and up and over each other, all the transistors, Moore's law will essentially restart, because it'll be, instead of a two-dimensional Moore's law, which is exponential, a three-dimensional Moore's law. So theoretically, so this neurolace, which is nanorobotics, simply detecting on and off of neurons, artificially firing them, and broadcasting each neuron a serial coding connected to a receiver device, or a quantum computer, or a turning computer. You can then begin creating a machine-brain interface with your entire brain, which allows you to experience scripts. So you think thoughts into the computer, it translates them using data mapping of your neural network, creates an architecture, information structure, and can feed you like information back in your brain, allowing you to experience machine scripts, a HUD essentially. And so you can think to your computer in real time. As it puts thoughts in your head, you think thoughts into it, and it allows you to essentially a machine-brain interface with a turning machine, and it allows you to experience machine scripts. That's the first phase of the wetware augmentation. The next phase is bionic neurons, with chemical augmentation of your neurons. CRISPR, that edits your neurons' already existing DNA structure into something that works better. Quantum brain technology, which is essentially quantum computing, remodeling your neuronal structure with mechanical bionics. What else are we working on? All sorts of shit, I guess. Space-time is expanding, they think, as the inflation of the universe occurs. Well, they've discovered if you put a vacuum between two plates, you can get a charge between the two of them, which is the Ark of the Covenant, if you read the Bible. Essentially, you have a measured distance that is the space of the correct inflation rate. So as it pulls, it begins creating energy between it, or arcing. What else is there? AI, robotics, mechanical application of bionics on the human body to create cyborgs, or to create androids, or to create robots. Organic, synthetics, biology is pretty simple to understand. So you have a genome, or a DNA structure, and every cell in your body is programmed by this single code. What they didn't understand when they were trying to work with fetuses and stem cells is that you can take any DNA, or you can take any cell and grow it into anything. The reason that your body begins producing different cells in the original embryo and is because of the chemical composition and the temperature of the cell as it's growing. So if you can control the chemical composition and the temperature, you can, and you know the correct code, or the correct balance of these two, you can turn any DNA cell into any other cell fairly easily, just replicating itself. So the way DNA works is that temperature and chemical composition turn on and off different parts of the DNA structure as it's zipping and unzipping and replicating. And so you have it's essentially if you were to take thousands of pages of coding and then chop it up and then figure out how to put it all into one small paragraph of code that picks which coding from the thousands of pages you're using based upon the temperature and chemical composition as a compiler. That's essentially DNA. And this understanding will allow us to essentially, from saliva, from skin cells, from hair cells, replicate any cell that was in the body with this controlled compiler environment, chemical and temperature, and maybe electrical, I'm not entirely sure. But it's why, that's how it works theoretically. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't studied a lot of biology. This is mostly theoretical, I think. I think it's correct, though. I'm not sure. And what else are we working on? Artificial limb growth, attaching newly grown hands and shit, ears back onto the body, reintegrating it into the neural network. What else are we working on? There's a lot more. 3-dimensional music that uses what is called binaural beats. Binaural. It's 2 tones pulsing in your ear with the difference between the hertz, creating a third pulse in your mind. Once you apply that to dubstep and techno and rock and roll and singing with the formula worked out to get control of that third tone, it'll create 3-dimensional music essentially. Experience machines and experience machine scripts, video games that are played in your mind on your augmented neurons or your neuralays that are 1-to-1 ratio with reality. We'll have to figure out protocols and tokens to make sure people know they're in reality. It's kind of like that movie Inception, but with augmented reality. Van Neumann machines that begin data mapping first our solar system and regional star system, then start mapping our Milky Way universe, and then the multiverse, mapping the 4-dimensional finite block that was the first multiverse. Technology we're working on. That's some of it, I guess. That's the start of what we're working on. You also have taking fiber optics, and what you do is you create a weave out of it, like a blanket with all of the ends pointing out, and then the weave going around whatever you have, coming out the other side, creating metamaterial that bends light around it. To find these metamaterials, you simply flood an area with every spectrum of the IR until you hit the spectrum, and that causes the bouncing off of the tubes or whatever. And then you use an augmented vision like night vision or thermal or all of the infrared spectrum or all of the spectrum of light to see the reflection off of it, making the weeded or the weaved material no longer useful. The charged photon torpedo, which is essentially, I was talking earlier, you can up the voltage in a Tesla coil of an electrical current. You can do the same with light. I'm not entirely sure yet how. It's something around with tubing that's 100% reflective, charged with a laser in a circle that then charges up and then shoots it out in a single beam or a single photon packet a single photon packet. So you have packets of photon and lumens, I guess, would be the equivalent to voltage and current, and they both equal the total energy contained within it. This will allow us light weapons, essentially, like the more advanced than a laser, a lot more effective. What else are we working on? This is all just basic level stuff. You need to know how this stuff works though, and some of it's analogy and parallel, simply to open the door to the invention of it. Um, some of it probably doesn't work. I think some of it does. All of it. I'm not entirely sure yet. So yeah, quantum mechanics went off the deep end in the theory. They're actually, what they're doing is they're decoding hyper, and like what they thought was subatomic particle tunneling and swerving that was random is essentially just Planck length compression of space-time, causing, since our measurements can't see it yet, as a photon passes through the Planck length cubes of space-time, there's gravitational waves coming from this side that are extremely finite, and when they pass through it, it compresses the space-time cube, and the particle moves over relative to it, and then continues. That's tunneling and swerving. What else? AI programs, super intelligence computers. We have to be careful not to create hive minds. That's always what screws us. Like Vicky and iRobot, Skynet, and Terminator. Every single science fiction movie where robots really go crazy, it's because of a hive mind. The Borg from Star Trek. So I guess decentralized artificial intelligence that is different in every single android body it's in, is how we prevent interspecies war between hive minds and the individual, and then merging cyborgs, humanity, androids, aliens, synthetic beings, inorganic beings, organic beings, all into one blurred species that can intermingle, interreproduce, and can change their bioware and wetware at any time for cheap, customizing what they look like and stuff. That's the future to prevent war on our planet. What else? So there's a lot of different ways we can get energy. Cold plasma with water. If you look at the bottom of the ocean, there's rivers of water that are below, like they're below freezing, below zero, super cold, and there's still a liquid, and it's because water or hydrogen or hydrogen and oxygen, when combined, create an element type that allows cold fusion. So like, if you take and you compress, no, I'm losing my train of thought. I'll come back to it at another time. So we can create Dyson spheres in space and use a laser to beam the energy right into an energy collection unit. We can drill into the earth super deep with with various types of drill heads and stuff, and tap thermal energy. It's the future, really, of green energy. I think that oil, like, if you want to know how hot the temperatures will get if we continue to use oil, which we kind of have to. I think we should start terraforming immediately. But the temperature that it was before all of plant life was created and all the dinosaurs were created and all the, like, back before plant life is how hot the temperatures will get if we use all the oil, because all of that temperature was sucked in, or like the carbon that was creating that temperature, which came up from volcanoes, which then were super hot and created cellular life, which created plant life, which was buried, became oil. When you release all that carbon, we revert back to the temperatures we were at the start of our planet, which is really fucking hot. It's unlivable, really. It's just unlivable. And people say, well, it's a natural thing for oil to be released, and like, we go through these cycles of temperature-wise. We've seen it in the history, ice ages and shit. That's because oil will naturally leak from time to time and catch fire. There's the thing that caused the ice ages and stuff like that was, the minor ones may have been oil leaks, or it could be asteroid hits or volcanoes going off, super volcanoes. But it's current trends make temperature so hot that the Middle East will become unlivable in 30 years, parts of South America and America, parts of everywhere that is going to get too hot, I guess. What else are we working on? Materials. We need to build space elevators and stop using chemical rockets. It's the only feasible way to do mass travel. We need to start construction of Starship production plants in space, which means we have to learn how to mine resources from the asteroids. We have to learn how to manufacture in zero-G gravity. We have to create Dyson spheres, and chemical rocketry just isn't feasible anymore. It's space elevators. The problem is creating material that can handle it. I think that we'll figure out how to create stronger electron valences using what we call galvanizing, I guess, but like with a constant electrical charge that sinks in electron valences by amplifying the voltage of the electrons or lowering it, I'm not entirely sure, but by screwing with the electrical charge we can increase the valence strength of molecules. What else is there we're working on? There's a lot more. There's like most of the technology that I work on is for the multiverse interdimensional dream state. This is beginner stuff. Like I said, a lot of it is just an analogy to create a TRIP-A virus, which is a linear programming tool. We could create a really awesome future. We might have to go through some tribulations and some self-doubt and some troubles, but realistically, feasibly, we could do some pretty cool stuff as a civilization. But anyways, that's my video for the day.